Hi, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to our discussion on tongue level basics for flute playing. I want to start the discussion with a quick look at the mechanical means by which other instrument families let the player or assist the player change registers. This is a straight B-flat soprano saxophone. Like all of the saxophone family, it's equipped with a aptly named key here called the octave key. That key sits at the back of the saxophones and is operated by our left-hand finger. And what it lets us do is, for most of the common fingerings on the saxophone, not all of them, but for most of the notes that we can play on the saxophone, by engaging that octave key, it will shoot the note up a perfect octave, one octave higher than the note that we produce without the key on. To demonstrate that, I'll play the lowest A possible on the soprano sax, which is actually A in the second space of the music stave. And when I put this key on, it will shoot that A up to the A just above the 5 lines of the written music. Just like this. So you can hear that mechanically the saxophone is producing a very good octave leap. And whilst there is some change required by the player, the octave key will get the saxophonist 90% of the way to where they need to be to producing that in-tune octave leap. If we move now to the clarinet family, all of the clarinets have this key which some people confuse with an octave key. It is on the back of the clarinet, so like the saxophone, it's operated by our left-hand finger. But this is actually a register key. And the register key on a clarinet shoots the note up 1.5 octaves. It shoots it up a major 12th. So if we do the same example and play the lowest possible A that we can produce on a B-flat clarinet, that will be the A below the music stave. When we engage the register key, the note that will be produced will actually be 4th space E. So F-A-C-E being the music spaces. The pitch of E in the 4th space of the music line. So from A below the ledger lines to E 4th space, which is a major 12th. That's what will happen when we use the register key on a clarinet. So let's have a listen to that. And again, we have a very effective mechanical way on the clarinet to go a long distance in pitch upwards, a major 12th upwards, quite mechanically, through the use of a register key. A perfect octave on all of the saxophones through the use of an octave key. Where does that leave us with our friend here, the flute? Well, the flute, unfortunately, does not have any equivalent to the register or octave key on the other instrument families. There is no mechanical device on the flute that lets us change registers. The keys on the back of the flute are there to produce 2 notes, B and B flat. They have nothing to do with our left-hand thumb notes on the flute, on all of the flutes, have nothing to do with register change. So how do we do it in the most efficient and effective way on the flute? How do we produce octave changes and how do we play the high notes on the flute if the flute has no mechanical device to help us do it? Let's have a look. I'll start by playing a C chromatic scale through 1 octave down to low C. And just have a look at my fingers as I do it. And the more observant of you out there in viewer land may have noticed that when I started, my C, which is the 3rd space C, I only actually had 1 finger depressed, just the index finger on the left hand. Produces a perfect 3rd space in the music stave C. When I play low C, I've got all of the fingers on my left hand depressed except the little finger, whose only job on the flute is, by the way, to play G to G sharp. It has some jobs in the 3rd register of the flute, but essentially it's the G sharp finger, and it'll play no role in what we're talking about today, the left hand little finger. So just leave it hover over the G sharp key. So low C is all of the fingers on the left hand except that finger depressed, all of the fingers on the right, and the right hand little pinky finger across the first two keys that you'll find on your foot joint on the flute. Now I must say this is a B foot joint flute, so I have an extra hole here and pad that your flute may or may not have. All concert flutes go down to C. Some concert flutes have the extension of, like this flute, the extra low note. So for the purpose of our discussion today, we're going to assume that the lowest note we can hit on the flute is in fact low C, because all of the flutes, including the alto flute, but not the piccolo flute. The piccolo flute stops at D, but the concert flute, which is what we're talking about today, all concert flutes go down to low C. So the low C fingering again is all fingers down, except our left hand little finger, right hand little finger against both of those keys, and if we play that note, we get the pitch of low C. If we play an octave higher, we lift up all those fingers except the index finger, so our octave on the flute on low C is a mechanical change. It's the equivalent of an octave key, even though it's a very, active octave key. We've got to involve all of our fingers on our hand, but we have a mechanical way to change the pitch from low C to the next C an octave higher. The same applies to low C sharp, and if we go to low C sharp, we simply rock our little finger to just the outside of the two right-hand pinky finger keys there. As we go up an octave, you'll notice that C sharp, third space C sharp, has no fingers depressed. C sharp in the third space of the music lines is just the default note when you blow across a flute. Low C sharp, as you can see, is very different. It's got most of the fingers engaged. But like C to C and C sharp to C sharp, a unique fingering change on the flute gives us that octave. If we go up to D, low D is produced with the 3 fingers on both hand, and of course the thumb key on for all of these notes on the back, all of the low notes. If we now play low D and lift our left hand index finger up, we'll get the D in the 4th line of music. Again, a very mechanical way to change the octave. Low D, lift up one finger, the flute will largely produce the octave leap for us, just as it would, as it pressing the octave key on the saxophone would. The final note where we've got a fingering change where that will help us is low D sharp. So if that's low D, we put our right hand pinky finger on the closest key to it, and that's low D sharp. And then as for D, we lift up our left hand index finger we get a perfect octave D sharp. Unfortunately, that's where the fun ends, and on the flute there is no equivalent fingering change to produce the octaves from E up to high C and above. It becomes a tongue level change, and this is important, that like when we sing an octave, if you sing that at home, just any pitch, but sing an octave with your voice, you'll definitely feel the rise and fall of your tongue. Now, it doesn't really matter which part of your tongue rises and falls. It's a natural body movement to sing the octave. That concept is what we need to develop on the flute when the flute doesn't give us a mechanical way to change the pitch of an octave. Okay, so if we play low E, there is no fingers change to produce from first line E to 4th space E in the music stave. It's all done by a tongue level movement and a minute adjustment to our embouchure. But I'm focusing at the moment your mind on what happens when you sing an octave. And it's similar as we go up the flute. It becomes a pitch change created by a movement of our tongue inside of our mouth. And as the intervals get wider, by a minor adjustment to the opening but in our lips where the air comes out and across the embouchure hole. Okay, so we can use the same 4 notes that we've focused on in this tutorial today, low C sharp, D and D sharp, to force our tongue to make the octave change. Okay, the way we do that is if we play low C and hold the low C fingering, and then the same as if we sang ah, rise our tongue, you'll note that you can actually produce the octave without blowing any harder on the flute and without changing any fingering. So low C to third space C without changing our fingers at all on the flute. Now, of course, the tongue level C, third space C, is furry and a bit out of tune. You'd certainly never play this C in a song like this. It's much duller and fuzzier. That's not the point. What we're trying to do is teach our body to find a way to shoot the flute up an octave where it isn't giving us any mechanical way to do it. So I really strongly recommend you get some practice in at changing low C to third space C. When you get good at that, go to low C sharp. The same thing applies. Hold the low C sharp fingering. And produce the octave above it by maintaining the low fingering. What you're doing is producing an overtone, a fundamental overtone. I can't stress enough that this is not about blowing harder. It's the opposite. So we're maintaining the feel of the low note, and the same as when we sing, we don't blow harder air out of our body if we want to sing a high note. Ah, it's a movement inside of our body. And it's the same movement inside of our body that lets us hold the low note and shoot up an octave. If we go to D, hold low D and just hold the fingering for it. Ah-ee, 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 that movement inside of your mouth. And then we go the final one of D sharp. Don't change the fingering. And get used to the rise and fall of your tongue, allowing you to change the pitch on the flute. It's one of the absolute secrets to being able to play the high notes on the flute and control them without blasting your way to the higher notes. So if you practice that, we'll do another video on a stage 2 of tongue level practice where we'll go further up the overtone series. But the key thing I want you to get out of today's video is that you can instruct the flute to play an octave higher when it doesn't expect to by the way that you use your tongue inside of your mouth. You don't have to contort your face and, on the flute. It's not about that at all. There are some minor changes in the hole, in the opening of your lips, particularly as that interval gets wider than an octave. But the key change is a tongue level change. I hope that's been of help to you. Look out for a more advanced video where we take that concept further. Keep in touch via my website, www.brianhayes.biz. That's B-I-Z. Drop me an email if you have any questions about fundamentals of playing the flute or of any of the other instruments that I play, teach and record on. And I hope you've got something out of this, because in 40 years or so of playing the flute and teaching the flute, the most common frustration I see is people just trying to blast their way uncontrollably as they try and play higher on the flute. It's quite the opposite of that. It's all about controlling the tongue, the same as we do with our voice. Okay, I hope you've got something out of that. See you soon.